Do you know what it's like not being able to sleep because you're thinking too much? Well, I do. I used to do it like a champion, but not anymore, and here's how. My name's Steve, and I coach professional people just like you to combine your personal brilliance with unshakable emotional freedom. And a great place to start is by downloading my free, simple 5-step guide to mastering stress in the moment. This is Steve. Me, about 20 years ago. I didn't sleep so well. I went to bed and I would just thinking about what I needed to do, thinking about what had happened in the day, thinking about what people might be thinking and saying, thinking about thinking, overthinking, overanalyzing. I was especially good at concocting fantastic futures and having catastrophic thoughts about everything that could go wrong. My peace of mind was on the line, as well as the energy that I needed for work. If I couldn't sleep well, I couldn't perform well. So here's what I did and what I learned from it. And in unpacking this, I think it's just as important to explore what didn't work and why it didn't work, as well as what did. Because there are also insights and learning in what didn't work. Now, at first I tried the obvious thing, which is I tried to not think about things. Have you ever tried that? Have you ever tried to not think about a red Ferrari? Well, whoops, I bet you just did. It doesn't really work. The more I tried to not think about the things I was thinking about, the more I thought about them. Turns out the human brain isn't so good at trying to not think about something, because trying to not think about it generally just gets you thinking about it. So I figured that instead of trying to not think about the things I was thinking about, I needed to give my brain a more positive direction. I needed to do something that was affirmative. I needed to think about something else. Something comforting perhaps, something happy. Well, it certainly worked better. I thought about joyful days, happy days, successful days, days that I did great things. That resulted in better internal feelings and I relaxed more, and that's helpful. There was just one snag. After I stopped consciously thinking about something else, I would slip back into the old thinking again. So there was some promise there, but I hadn't hit the nail on the head. So I thought, what about more active distractions, like read a book, like listen to the radio, like watch a midnight movie? Well, yeah, they took my mind off things, they distracted me, but you know, watching a midnight movie doesn't exactly help you catch up on your sleep hours, nor does reading a book, really. And besides, I'd finish my active distraction, my book or my movie, and I'd just go back into the same thinking. And I came to realise that's because I hadn't really dealt with the thoughts. Now, the next thing I tried was meditating. Now I was getting somewhere. It wasn't highly formalised meditation that I was doing. I was simply sitting in a peaceful place in silence in the dark, just being an empty vessel with my eyes closed and being aware of the present moment. And yet, when I stopped again, I started thinking about things. And I realised again it's because I hadn't actually dealt with the thoughts. And that's where I realised there was something I should have done first. It was a sequencing thing. I just didn't have my activities in the right order. Now let's call this thing that I should have done first 1. I didn't realise about 1 20 years ago. And when I did, that's when this started working. And then when I added something else to my routine, let's call that thing 2, then it was game over for these bad sleeping patterns. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, do give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the notifications bell so that you'll know when more content like this arrives. The insight that I had was the reason I was doing all this thinking is because my mind was actually trying to take care of me by making sure I didn't forget things that were important. You see, there were a lot of things going on in my professional and personal life. Multiple projects, multiple operational things, things that I had to remember, deadlines, things I had to be ready for. Remember to call Bob, remember to call Fred, remember that report that you've got to write, remember that you agreed to meet somebody tomorrow. Remember to mention this in the report, remember to mention that in the report, remember to check such and such. As well as, damn, I forgot to do that today, I must remember to do it first thing tomorrow. As well as the bigger things like, are we going to be ready for the next major release? Now, when you have a lot of stuff going on, if you don't have a system that you trust for remembering those things, then it's going to spin around up here. That's what I was doing then. And as a coach today, a lot of the clients that I see come to me with similar things, that there's too many thoughts spinning around in their heads. So here's the first of those 2 things. This is the thing that I called 1. I needed to get this noise out of my head. Onto what? Onto paper. Get it out of your head and onto a notebook. But here's the thing I realized. You can't just write down what it is you have to remember, because that doesn't always pacify those parts of the mind that are trying to protect you by remembering it, by spinning it around again and again. Whatever it is that you have to remember, turn it into an action and write down when you see yourself taking that action. So if what's spinning around is that I need to write a report tomorrow, I'm not just going to write down that I have to write it. I'm also going to write down when I see myself doing it, or at least starting it. If what's spinning around is that there's somebody I need to call, I'm not just going to write down that I need to call them. I'm also going to write down when I see myself doing it. And if what's spinning around is that there is a problem with something, I'm not just going to write down that there is a problem, but I'm going to turn it into an action. What am I actually going to do about that? And when do I see myself doing it? Now, the funny thing is that I found out very quickly that it doesn't actually matter whether you actually do it when you saw yourself doing it. It's just that there's a visualized action anchored to that scribble that you put into your notepad. And that seems to pacify that part of the mind that's trying to not forget this by repetition. Now, by the way, for this to work, you must also develop the habit of using the notes that you write down. If all you ever do is write down and never refer back to those notes, and never take those reminders, then those parts of the mind that are trying to protect you will just keep spinning that idea around. Now that started to work for me. But what about the thing I called two? Well, what I realized when I did meditation and it wasn't working is it was simply because I wasn't getting things out of my head and onto paper first. When I did that first and then did the meditating, it worked really well. But I don't want to be doing either in the middle of the night reactively when I'm already having troubled thoughts. I want to get that dealt with ahead of time. So I established what I called the mental detox habit. What I did when it was still at least an hour before I was due to go to bed, I would get my notepad out and I would get everything out of my head that I needed to get out of my head. And then I would switch off the television or the radio. I would put my phone away. I would have no books in sight, no stimulants basically. And I'd turn out the light and I would simply sit in the darkness and in the silence for about 15 minutes with my eyes closed, being an empty vessel, being aware of the present moment. It's not that thoughts didn't come in and go out, they do, and it's okay. But this combination of getting things out of my head and having this peaceful meditative time before it was time to go to bed meant that I was in a great state when I went to bed. And if something did pop into mind in the middle of the night and I woke up with it, I would just write it down and go straight back to bed and straight back to sleep. Now, one particular thought that can come up and bother us is the thought that we're not good enough. And if you want to explore how to deal with that particular thought, then watch this video up here. Or if you've already watched that video, then watch this one down here instead. This is Steve, wishing you health and happiness.